just after 2 p.m., the effects of at least 15 bomb and torpedo hits have reduced the mightiest battleship ever built to a sinking hulk.
You know, looking back on it, it all makes sense. Become a world power, defeat the Russians, invade all your neighbors, get pummeled to death by a Western country's air power because they sank all your carriers. I didn't think it would end up this way. Although looking back at it, some mistakes were probably made. Let me tell you guys how I got here. But first, this video is sponsored by the online free-to-play game World of Warships, where you can take command of 100 historically accurate ships, including me, the Yamato. Each of the over 200 in-game ships spanning 8 nations are incredibly detailed to be as realistic as possible. Play with over 7 million players across the world. Unlock new ships as you play and conquer the sea. Click the link below to play World of Warships and collect a special bonus starter pack. New players can register with the code PLAYWARSHIPS2018 to receive 250 doubloons, 1 million credits, the HMS Campbelltown premium ship, 1 port slot, and 3 days of premium time. After the defeat of the Russians in 1905, Japan had hit its stride in being a world power with the effectiveness of, and the commitment to, their navy. Over the next 30 years, the Japanese would continue to build this branch up and use it to conquer more territory and increase their prowess on the world stage. However, this was not easy for the small island nation, that many times found itself lacking the quantity of resources needed to create the number of ships needed to stay competitive. Fast forward to 1937. Japan, being very aware of this problem, decides to go with a quality over quantity strategy for their fleets, to be able to stand up to the American naval production abilities, who they foresaw war with in the future. This was accomplished by creating a new class of ships that would become the largest ever created, the Yamato class, which they found themselves free to do after letting their signature on the London Naval Treaty expire, and began carrying out in secret plans to build the Yamato and her sister ship, Musashi. And this secrecy went to a great extent. Designers' drawings were locked away at the end of the workday, construction yards had large barriers built around them to mask the view from potential spies, and workers were threatened with execution if they spoke about what they were working on. The result, though, was this gigantic behemoth, commissioned on 16 December 1941, spanning 256 meters at the waterline, and boasting 9 46-centimeter guns, amongst a host of other guns and anti-aircraft guns. I won't list them all on here because lists are boring, go to Simple History for that. But the armament layout was very impressive and evolved over the life of the ship. The Yamato was able to be built carrying such large guns because, unlike the Americans, the Japanese did not have any physical barriers to their ship sizes. All American ships had to be built narrow enough to fit through the Panama Canal, which limited the maximum size of their turrets and guns and how much weight they could carry. So the result was that the Yamato, with its large guns and a hull that could support them, would be able to outrange any US ships in a duel and sink them before the US ships were even able to fire. Seems like a pretty solid plan, right? Well, this is where you get into a big problem. At Midway, the Japanese lost 4 aircraft carriers. And I don't think it can be overstated how bad of a position this put them in. Unlike the glory days of the Russo-Japanese War, airplanes had become a huge factor in naval warfare. By the time of Midway and the Yamato's service life, carrier-based aircraft squadrons could mean death for any type of ship with a well-placed bomb or torpedo, regardless of how powerful the ship was to other ships. And I don't mean to sound like this would be easy for the airplanes. Battleships, the Yamato included, had large anti-aircraft emplacements to deter this, but the fact of the matter is, without a carrier escort or carrier grouping, lone battleships with no air support could quickly become targets, and after Midway, Japan was really coming up short in the carrier department. This issue, along with others I'll mention, is a common theme in Yamato's fairly unimpressive service record for its size. Its first action took place at the Battle of Midway, although the battleship was too far away to take part in the battle before it ended, and returned to Japan.
Screw you guys, I'm going home!
This is going to be a common theme. In mid-August 1942, the ship had to sit out the Battle of Guadalcanal due to lack of ammunition and fuel, and sat in Truk Lagoon until May of 1943, where after that, she ended up in Kure for inspection and repairs, and remained around Japan until returning to Truk the following August, and essentially sat there until October. And right now you're probably thinking, what are the Japanese doing? So far it looks like they built a super ship and are using it as a cruise liner. But along with the aforementioned air cover problem, Yamato's engines consumed a lot of fuel, which limited its movements and combat ability. It's only in December of 1943 that Yamato first really gets into combat. When ferrying troops to the Admiralty Islands, Yamato and her task group were attacked by the American submarine Skate, where she was hit by a torpedo and a 16-foot hole was blown open in the hull, causing the rear turret's upper magazine to flood. And yep, you guessed it, that means it had to go back to the dock for repairs.
Screw you guys, I'm going home!
It was at this time, too, that some of the guns were augmented. In April 1944, Yamato departed for the Philippines, and sort of took part in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, although the only thing of note that it did was accidentally shoot at returning Japanese planes. And then guess what happens after this? Yep, more dock time. Until departing on July 8th to eventually be present for the Battle of Leyte Gulf as part of the 1st Battleship Division, and was later damaged by a bomb at the Battle of Sheboygan Sea, but was able to get away, unlike her sister ship, Musashi, that was sunk after 17 bomb and 19 torpedo strikes. It is after this, though, that Yamato sees some of her best action as part of Kurita's center force, where it engaged the American close support formation known as Taffy 3. This was the only time Yamato ever engaged surface targets. See? Told you planes were the way of the future. And landed a few hits on American ships. However, Yamato was diverted by a spread of torpedoes headed for her, and was unable to rejoin the battle. Yamato then returned with Kurita's force to Bruni, and was folded in as the flagship of the 2nd Fleet after the 1st Battleship Division was dissolved. In November, it saw some minor action in the East China Sea before being dry docked yet again at Kuri for repairs and anti-aircraft upgrades. From January to February of 1945, Yamato rejoined a reactivated 1st Battleship Division, then got transferred again to the 1st Carrier Division, making Yamato like that one really flaky friend you had in high school. On March 19th, it got caught up in the Kuri raid, but sustained only minor damage. Allied forces began the final stage before the invasion of the Japanese home islands on April 1st with the invasion of Okinawa, to which the Japanese Navy responded with Operation Tengo, which was basically a suicide mission to halt the Americans. The basic idea for the Yamato's part was to take a one-way allotment of fuel and a full magazine to Okinawa, where the ship would be beached and act as a large gun emplacement that would fight until destroyed. But due to the Americans decoding Japanese radio messages, the ship and her group were intercepted by an American carrier group, supported by some destroyers. Yamato, learning of this, prepared for a fight, with all crew in their anti-aircraft positions by dawn on April 7th. The force began to be shadowed by 2 seaplanes around 8:30 in the morning, with American Hellcat fighters showing up around 11 to deal with potential Japanese aircraft, of which there were none. A little later at 12:30, all hell broke loose on the Yamato, with just shy of 300 American bomber and torpedo planes descending on the Yamato and her escort ships. After about 10 minutes, 2 bombs had taken out 2 of her anti-aircraft mounts and blown a hole in the deck. A few minutes later, a 3rd bomb destroyed the radar room and one of the 127mm mounts. 5 minutes later, a torpedo struck one of the forward sides as the crew began to be strafed on the ship's deck. Victory is mine! Shortly after this, 3 more torpedoes hit the ship, 1 near the engine room and 1 near one of the boiler rooms. The 3rd hit is disputed but probable. This attack concluded around 12:47 with the ship listing a few degrees to port, which was counterflooded. The 2nd attack began at 1 from all directions, and due to the large amount of planes, the anti-aircraft gun's effectiveness was cut down just from being overwhelmed. 3 to 4 more torpedoes hit the battleship, damaging a couple of fire rooms. The 2nd attack left Yamato listing around 15 degrees to port, which even after counterflooding remained at about 10, reducing speed and leaving the main battery unable to fire. The 3rd attack began at 1:40, with 4 bombs hitting the ship's superstructure and another fire room being flooded. At 2:02 p.m., the order to abandon ship was given, and the situation on the ship was chaos. At 3:05, a final group of torpedo bombers attacked Yamato again, causing the ship to capsize. Come on, then! Her large 46cm turrets then fell off into the ocean, which created suction that pulled crewmen in the water down below. After this, one of the bow magazines detonated, in an explosion whose cloud was over 3 miles high and could be seen from about 100 miles away. A little under 300 of her 2,700-man crew were able to be recovered by friendly ships that then withdrew to Japan. In the 4 hours and 14 minutes of the battle, Yamato was hit by at least 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs, capping off a very unextraordinary career for such a legendary battleship. The cultural significance of the Yamato being sunk, though, was huge. Japan took great pride in its navy, and many Japanese citizens felt that as long as the Yamato was around, Japan couldn't fall, and the loss of this ship had a very foreboding message to many people. However, at least in my opinion, the ship was more effort than it was worth. And don't get me wrong, the core concept behind it does make sense, but without the additional arms of the Navy, i.e. carriers and support planes, the thing becomes a large target for enemy planes. And that, along with the large fuel consumption, made it a great propaganda piece that spent most of its time sitting in port, waiting for its moment to come that never would. Thank you to World of Warships for reaching out to sponsor another video. I would also like to thank my patrons on Patreon for making all these videos possible. I know there's a lot of naval fans in there, and I hope you guys like it. Also, thank you to all of you for watching and sitting through me probably butchering a lot of names, and I'll see you on the next one.